Hello and welcome to this video series on HTML for beginners. Now in this video we're going to be learning how to make life so much simpler. Well, okay, life as far as HTML coding is concerned anyway. Now cascading style sheets, or otherwise known as CSS, are going to save us loads of time in coding of things like the font style of your page, or color, or positioning of tables and images, and really the list goes on and on. The best thing, or one of the best things, is that CSS gives you the ability to change these things globally instead of individually. Here, let me explain. Let's say, for example, that you have several websites all with the same font style that you found a while back and thought that it was so cool you had to put it on all of your text on all of your web pages in all of your sites. Now then, for example, you've got about, say 378 pages on your sites that have this cool font. Now all of a sudden you learn that there is some kind of license with this font that does not allow you to put it on this type of site or this type of page that you have. So you need to drop everything you've got and change the font style on every one of those 378 pages. Pack a lunch, folks. This is going to take a while. Now then, you go to each page, you do a Control F, one of the shortcut ways, and you search for all the fonts that you need to change, and you make those changes, you save the page, and you re-upload it to overwrite the old one. Now, let's figure that it's taking you about a minute to do this for each one of those 378 pages. That's, of course, there's no mistakes, everything's running smoothly, the dog doesn't need to go for a walk, the kids aren't screaming, none of that, everything's going great. That said, you're looking at over 6 hours, and that's with zero breaks. Now, if you were using CSS, this task could be finished in less than 2 minutes, and that's if you work really slow. You see, CSS is basically a text file that tells the browser what to do with a particular element of your HTML code. The CSS file tells the browser, let's say that the font style is such and such, and the font size is this, and the font color that, and on every page you have this CSS file on, or pointing to, it's going to have this font style, size, and color. Plus, no matter which browser the visitor is using, it's going to show up the same way each and every time. Not so, necessarily, if the font is as described in the first example. Just typical HTML coding. The browser may make the font huge or with a different color, or heck, you just can't be for sure unless you test it in every browser type and version. Now, of course, I suggest that you do that on a smaller scale anyway, just to make sure that it works on Internet Explorer as well as it works on Firefox, but you just never can tell. With CSS, however, you can pretty well rest assured it's going to be the same across the board. So basically, CSS in a word, awesome. Now, you can create a CSS and upload it to your server, and above your closing head tag, you put a link to your CSS on, and the browser will find the style that it needs from that link to the CSS and apply it to the text. Or if you want to have all of the additional coding on your web pages, then you would use the opening and closing style tags, and between them we're going to place all that coding. Now, I myself just prefer to have the CSS off the page and a link pointing to it rather than additional lines of code on the page. Just my personal preferences. To solve our font license problem, well, we can change the font style in the CSS text file, upload it, overwrite the existing CSS, the one with the old font style, and quicker than you can say, I didn't see that in the license terms, you've changed the font style on your 378 pages. CSS can be a little tricky to learn the hows and the whys, so we're not going to teach you the CSS in this video. CSS is so important that it commands its entire video series all on its own. We are, however, going to introduce you to CSS. Now, you can find CSS templates on the web and simply use them to make minor changes where you need them. And templates, and what I'm going to show you here in a minute, is a CSS generator. Pretty cool tool, and you can use this just as easily as templates. CSS, by the way, can also be used for an entire page layout. Instead of using tables, for example, like what we've been talking about in the entire video series so far. And what's cool is you can use CSS to tell the browser how to present your entire web page, not just the font style or background color. Pretty cool stuff. But again, that's material for a different video series. So let's go ahead and take a look at some cascading style sheets, shall we? Now I've opened up one of those web pages we were working on in an earlier video on, I think it was dealing with background images or colors and such. What we're going to do now is, this is the basic text here. Let me show you how it looks in the browser, just to kind of give you that feel. And as you can see, there's no formatting, no nothing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to introduce you to one of those CSS generators, and here's the URL for that, AHFB 2000, and just to kind of help you remember that, it stands for Advanced HTML for Beginners 2000.com/CSSgenerator.php. And this is just one of a gazillion that you're going to find out there if you do a Google search or using your favorite search engine for CSS generator. But they're all typically about kind of sort of pretty much the same. What we're going to do now is just go through this fairly quickly. I'm just going to run through this and introduce you to this. Again, they're all pretty much the same, and once you've generated the code, you can go back in and you can alter that code a little bit easier, again, however you want to do it. But basically what you can do is you just go ahead and fill in the blanks as they ask you to here. For example, your body style, background color, image, and we kind of dealt with this as far as the hand coding in a prior video. But let's say we want to go with, let's say a creamy color here. And we don't have an image, we're not going to mess with that. Font style, we'll just leave that alone. Font color, we'll go with, what do we want to go with here? Let's go with dark blue, and let's say 10 pixels. Then we go on down here to our links. Now we're not going to have any links in this, so we don't necessarily have to mess with this, but if you were, and again we touched on this in a prior video too as far as hand coding, but this is for CSS, similar in the respect that it treats the links a little bit differently, or you can customize the way that it treats the links, but you're not going to have the actual HTML coding. And let me just show you what I'm talking about as we get to it. But we're not going to have any links, so we're not going to mess with this. But hey, play around with it all you want. And let me see here what else we got here. Choose your page header styles. Now what they're referring to here is some of your not so much your header image, but your header text. Some of the text at the beginning of your sales copy, for example. Now then you would have a choice. You want some big bold text to grab your attention or grab your visitor's attention. You can either use an H tag or something that's a large font size like 72 pixels or 48 pixels. Now the difference, and the reason why you'd want to use an H tag, by the way, H1 being the largest, H6 being the smallest, the search engines or the browsers, search engines, they'll see an H tag and recognize the text in between the opening and the closing H tags as having more importance to the relevancy of the content on that page than if, say, it were the same size but noted as 78 pixels or 48 pixels instead of an H1 or an H2 tag. So again, you don't want to use too many H1 tags, but you definitely want to use them in the right places. That being said, everything that we have that is in between an H1 tag, for example, is going to be Times New Roman, and is going to be, we'll say, now we're going to go with red. Yeah, red. And it's going to be centered on our page. And H2, again, you can do the same thing with it, just play around with it however you want, but we're not going to mess with that. Now, once we're out of the massively important text, the headers, then we're going to get into the typical text, the normal text throughout your page. Anything between the P and the closing P tag will have Verdana text, because that's what we're going to tell it to. And it's going to have, let's say, this ugly green color here. And the size, we're going to say 11 pixels. Alignment, we're going to go with typical left-hand alignment. Block quote, that's what's indented. And again, you can change the alignment and the color and all that, but we're not going to mess with that. Now then, generate my CSS document. Yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And here we go. And now then, what we're going to do now is, instead of highlighting all this, we're just going to right-click, select all, right-click, and copy. Now then, we need to open up a blank text document. I got one kind of handy right here. And I move that into